Hello, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming, and today we're going to look at Drukhari transports. We're going to talk about what the transports are, and then we're going to break down each one individually, starting with the Raider, and then the Venom, and then the Tantalus. We're going to kind of dive into some ways you could use them effectively. We're not going to get crazy deep in this because I know I've touched on it in multiple videos in the past. I just want to give my individual thoughts on each one. So Drukhari have three transport options available to them. They have the Raider, they have the Venom, and then they have the Tantalus. And all three really have their pros and cons. Transports in general are just a staple for this army, and for as long as I've been playing them, they have been. Now, I didn't play them in earlier editions like 7th and Oldhammer, but I have to imagine that they were still pretty much a staple in those editions as well. What they do is they offer a lot of mobility and some protection for your T3 bodies. Yes, your elves are kind of mobile already with their 8-inch movement, 7 inches for your racks. But having 14-inch movement and fly, it gets you further and it gets you faster. Having a wound soak before people can pry into your T3 bodies is important. And then couple that with the fact that you're just going to get places faster is going to help you. And then all of them are open topped, so they can become effective gunboats as well. First one we're going to talk about is the Raider, and I think it's probably the worst of the three transports, mostly because of its points cost. I still play them, but I feel like it's just out of necessity. I don't take it because I'm like, oh, this is really good. I take it because I'm like, oh, I need to get my incubi up the table, or oh, I need this. It's one of those where they just are a little overpointed. If they were a little cheaper, I could justify bringing one easier, and I could justify bringing more easier, but we'll get into that. Everything that made it special in previous editions is effectively gone, and I do know that this is the index. We could be getting a lot of it back. I understand that. But I'm not looking at it as this is the index. I'm looking at it as, is this something that I want to bring in my army? You know, the good melee profile is gone, the chain snares. The Grizzly Trophy is gone, which is the leadership debuff. Splinter racks are gone, so you don't get the automatic rapid fire. Not that your weapons are going to have that anyway. And then the Phantasm grenade launcher is gone, and that was just a little gun that did mortal wounds if you rolled over leadership. So all in all, literally every upgrade that this model had is gone outside of do you take the Dark Lance or the Disintegrator Cannon? So it ultimately just feels like not worth, because in ninth, you generally wanted at least one of those upgrades. You know, if you were running witches in it, you wanted probably the chain snares or the grizzly trophies or both, just because you're going to need to charge it into something. I will say that it it's not all bad. It still moves 14 inches and flies, although we all know that fly is way less important now than it was. With the way that you measure for flying, it's a lot of times just faster to go around a terrain feature than over it. So it's one of those where fly actually doesn't do much right now unless you're far away from the terrain feature. It does auto advance 6, which will give it some utility. Some of the guns you can put on Cabalites are assault, like their splinter rifles are assault inherently. So being able to just advance it and shoot it, or advance it and cleanse or homers or something like that, means you're going to be able to get 20 inches of movement and still interact with the game, and that's a good utility. But you can also get that on Venoms, so it's one of those where it's not amazing, but it is nice to have. And then firing deck 11 means you can make it a pretty good gunboat. Overall, it has utility and use. It just lost a lot of what made it unique and special in the index, and at 90 points, it's just too much. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's just an orc truck, but it's almost double the points. Like, the orc truck is T8, this is T8. The orc truck has 10 wounds, this has 10 wounds. The orc truck moves 12, this moves 14. This flies, but the orc truck heals 1 in your command phase, and then this can take a dark lance or a disintegrator cannon, and the orc truck gets a big shooter. So for all intents and purposes, it is an orc truck, right? The orc truck has better melee, this has better shooting, and at the end of the day, what it boils down to, it's just too expensive for 90 points. If this came down to the 70-point range, it would be very playable. I personally would like to see it in the 60 to 65, but that might be getting a little too cheap for it. 70 seems like a reasonable price for what you're getting, something that's going to get shot off the table very quickly and isn't going to have a ton of damage output unless you sink more points into it. So to me, it's like 70 is probably the first place we go, and if it still seems too much, we go down, and then if it seems too little, we go up. 70 seems like that happy middle ground to start with. They do have uses, and a couple of them can be effective gunboats for protection and shooting for your squads of infantry. You know, and a good example of that is you can use Venoms to split your Cabalite squads in half, and then you can put the special weapons in the Raider and the splinter rifles in the Venom, and then you can use another Venom to do the same thing. So this boat would have like 3 dark lances, 2 splinter cannons, 2 shredders, 2 blasters. You know, you can get a lot of shooting going out of it, but then we're talking about big points sinks in order to make that happen, because each Venom is 80 points, and then each squad of Cabalites is over 100 points. I think for Cabalites and a Venom, you're looking at, I think it's 200 without looking it up. So you're literally spending 500 points to make one Raider a gunboat. Now, don't get me wrong, you're getting other things out of it. I'm just saying, like, that's a big investment to make a Raider feel like it's worth it. When I could just take a Ravager for less points and it gets 3 Dark Lances, or I could just run Venoms. Speaking of which, that's next on the deck. To me, these are the cream of the crop for our transports. They are the staple right now. They do break 5-man squads of Witches or Cabalites. They do not break racks, but racks can come in 5 anyway. They break your 10-mans into 5-mans, and then you can put them however you want to as long as 5 of them go into the Venom. So you could put like all your splinter rifles in the Venom and all your special weapons on the table. You could reverse it. You could, however you want to do it, it doesn't matter. Free war gear, which, I mean, again, I'm never going to stop complaining about it until it gets fixed. Free war gear means you're just going to always run 2 splinter cannons on it. There's literally no reason to run a rifle. 14-inch move and fly with a much smaller footprint means it will actually help you, because you're not having to move as big of a model over the terrain, so you're not having to account for as far of a distance. It does gain sticky objectives when Cabalites are in it, as does the Raider. That's an important thing to remember, and it is ultimately a pretty good ability, right? Like, I will never complain about Cabalites being pointed the way they are, because they're very good right now. I like loading mine with all the special weapons from Cabalite squads and putting splinter rifles on the table. I can combo it with Raiders or a Tantalus to get big gunboats, as I mentioned with the Raider. You could do 2 Venoms for the Raider or 3 Venoms to combo with the Tantalus. 80 does seem a little expensive. Again, I could see these going to about 70 and they would still be not underpointed. Like, it feels still very good, but 80 isn't terrible for what you're getting out of it. And it's interesting because Venoms historically have not been more expensive than Raiders, but I feel like right now they should be. 80 seems a little overpointed for a Venom, but not much. 90 seems grossly overpointed for a Raider. And it's just kind of a weird world we live in where something with a higher toughness and more wounds just feels inherently worse. The Tantalus, it's 230, which is what it was, and it actually doesn't seem bad for what you're getting. You get a T10 chassis with 18 wounds. It has a 4-up save and a 5-up invuln, so it might actually stay on the board for a whole battle round. I've not put mine on the table yet, but that might be something I do today, actually, as I plan my games. Its 16-inch move and fly is solid, but the model is huge, so you're still going to struggle to get it anywhere on the table, and it's not going to clear terrain very easily. The 16 capacity and firing deck means it interacts the way it always has, and you can load it up with whatever you want. You could split it up with Venoms to do special weapons out of Cabalites. You could just put 15 Cabalites in it. You could put 15 racks with guns in it, and I think the 15 racks isn't the worst idea, because you could have 3 sniper rifles coming out of the Tantalus. You could have 3 liquefiers and then 3 ossifactors. So I don't think that's actually a bad idea. I don't think it's amazing, but when you empower it, all 3 squads will get empowered effectively at that point. So again, I don't think it's bad. And that would probably be what I consider, and especially if it dies, they have a shrug to prevent the mortal wounds, so they'll have less that die. And honestly, 10 Cabalite special weapons with 5 racks for just that reason is also not a bad play, because again, if it dies, you can throw the mortals on the racks first, try to shrug them to prevent like your models from dying, and then still have a sniper rifle and ossifactor and a liquefier plus all the Cabalite guns coming out. So to me, that's probably what I'm going to test first is 5 racks and 10 special weapon Cabalites. Its gun is still good at strength 10, -2 damage. So the gun actually went up from ninth. The AP went down by 1 because it used to be 8-3-2 and now it's 10-2-2. But it's still 12 shots. And with its 12 shots, ballistic skill 3, if you empower it, it can be a pretty effective gunboat. Like it will do some damage to things. There's no 18 wound, no obscuring rule anymore, so you can actually hide it behind terrain because it doesn't have the towering keyword. And that's going to help keep it on the table a little bit longer than it did. Its melee is still solid. It's only 6 attacks at strength 8, -1, 2 damage, but its strength went up, its AP went down. But it stayed at weapon skill 4, and it's right in line with how most of the melee has been in the transition into 10th. Grading it on the scale of 10th alone, its melee is solid. The funny thing is the scything charge ability. On a 2+, you do mortals on a charge. On a 6, you do D3 plus 3 mortals. You can tank shock it and roll 8 dice for tank shock. And obviously, you get 2 extra dice if your strength is higher than the target's toughness. So into infantry, you could actually just really do a lot of damage before you even fight with it. And I think that's also some good play. Again, I'm not a fan of mortal wounds, but if these are the tools that I'm getting, I'm going to use them. In conclusion, I think the Raider is okay. It's a little overpointed, but it does have utility and uses. I don't think it's going to be one of those things where you build lists with it in mind. The Venoms to me are auto include. Those are what you're building around in terms of transports. They just offer a lot of maneuverability, flexibility, are just an overall much more point efficient unit than the Raider. I think the Tantalus looks very cheeky and fun. I don't know how good it's going to be. Like I said, I'm going to play test it probably today. And it does have a lot of options, so it's gonna be interesting. That's gonna wrap it up for today. Big shout out to my immortals, Captain Too Tall, the real Donnie G, Lord Wellingstone, and Daniel Bodecker. You guys are amazing, and I appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Links on the screen, links in the description.